In the cold rain of Chicago, a car accident suddenly occurred. A small fire broke out from the engine, leaving the crowd standing in fear. In the midst of that dangerous moment, a man in a convenience store uniform rushed straight into the fire to pull a woman out of the car. His heroic action quickly became the center of the media, but few people knew that just a few days later, the hero himself lost his job for missing his shift. Leaning over the fence for balance, he glanced upward just as the fire began to smother the congregate crowd. With no job, no income, and the burden of his mother's medical bills, he faced the haunting question, is kindness worth it? But in the darkest moment, a new door suddenly opened, completely changing his life forever. Welcome to Kindness Stories, where small acts create big miracles. Today, we'll explore an emotional story about courage, sacrifice, and how kindness can change a life. And that is an inspiring story about kindness, courage, and unexpected rewards in life. Remember, sometimes a small action can make a big change, not only for others, but also for ourselves. If you believe in the power of kindness, please share this story with your loved ones. Thank you for joining the Kindness Stories, so you don't miss the next warm stories. Thank you for joining us, and see you again on the journey of spreading kindness everywhere. Chicago in November is often bitterly cold, with a chilly wind blowing through the streets, carrying humidity and a biting cold. Heavy raindrops pattered on the awning of the Market Stop convenience store where Ethan Walker worked the evening shift. The dim fluorescent lights inside the store made the space quiet, even lonely. Gazing out, Ethan, 28, tall but thin, wore a worn blue-gray uniform. His hazel eyes were tired but gentle. The beeping of a barcode scanner was in his ear, and in front of him was a middle-aged woman frowning at the long wait. They both cracked their knuckles and stared at Peter. Their eyes wandered. "Please hurry up, I don't have all day," she grumbled. "Yes, I'm sorry, your card is faulty. Let me try again," Ethan said softly, trying to stay calm. His life was not easy. He worked more than 50 hours a week to pay the rent and buy medicine for his mother, Clara Walker, who had a heart condition. Yet Ethan never complained or complained. Deep down, he believed that things would get better if he was patient and kind. His life began to turn the course in that direction. At the end of his shift, Ethan closed up the shop, exhausted. The rain had picked up and the cold wind was stinging his face. He threw his old coat over his shoulders and prepared to head home. But as he stepped out the door, he saw a figure huddled under the awning near the streetlight. An older man with disheveled white hair and a scraggly beard, wearing a thin coat, shivering with cold. It was Mr. Henry, a homeless man who often appeared in this area. Ethan glanced at Mr. Henry, a little hesitant. It was cold and rainy and he didn't have much money. But then he sighed and moved closer. "Are you okay?" Ethan asked, pulling a leftover sandwich from his pocket. "Do you need anything?" Henry looked up, his cloudy eyes flashing with surprise. "I just need something warm. Thanks," he stammered. Ethan took off his jacket and draped it over Henry's shoulders. "Put this on. Don't sit here too long, it's cold," he said, and thrust the sandwich into Henry's hand. Henry grasped it tightly, shaking his head and nodding, his eyes brimming with tears. Ethan turned and walked away, the cold wind seeping through his thin uniform. He shivered, but felt warm inside. Despite his fatigue, he felt relieved that he had done something right. "We all need a little help on our bad days," he thought. The next day, Ethan resumed his evening shift at the store. It was still raining, but this time with thunder and lightning and stronger winds. His shift was relatively peaceful, with only a few customers stopping by to pick up snacks and coffee. Ethan sat behind the counter, looking out the window, watching the raindrops run down the glass. Suddenly, there was a loud noise. Moo! Ethan jumped to his feet. Outside the window, he saw a black car spin out of control and crash into a streetlight right across the street. The front end was crumpled, the headlights shattered, and white smoke billowed from the hood. Everything seemed to slow down. Ethan's eyes widened, his heart pounding. Someone had been hurt. A few passers-by stopped, but could only watch from a distance. "Call 911, someone call 911, a woman screamed. "I know this," said Leonie. Ethan didn't hesitate. He ran out of the store, ignoring the rain beating down on him in his soaked uniform. Car horns kept blaring, but he was focused on only one thing: saving the woman trapped in the car. As he got closer, Ethan saw a young woman sitting in the driver's seat, her head bowed over the steering wheel, seemingly unconscious. He tried to open the car door, but it was dented and wouldn't budge. A burning smell was coming from the engine, and a small fire had started under the car. "No, don't give up," Ethan told himself. He tried with all his might to pull the doorknob, but to no avail. "Help me," a weak woman's voice called from inside. His throat tightened. Ethan looked around, but saw no one running to help. He gritted his teeth, took a few steps back, and then lunged forward, kicking the car door. There was a deafening metallic screech, but the door barely moved. He kicked twice more, until the door finally sprung open. "Hold my hand!" Ethan reached into the car, careful to avoid the broken glass. He pulled the woman out of the seat, inch by inch. She groaned in pain, but held on tight to his hand. He jerked her upright, as feebly as she could move. She clung to him, holding on tight to his hand. The flames had reached the front of the car. Ethan felt the heat on his back. Faster! Faster! He gritted his teeth and pulled hard again, and both of them fell to the ground. At that moment, a huge fire broke out, engulfing the car in a bright orange light. The police and fire trucks arrived shortly after, sirens blaring deafeningly. Ethan hugged the woman, patting her back to calm her down. "You're okay. You're safe," he gasped, his whole body limp. The police officer approached, his eyes filled with surprise. "You just saved her from that car?" Max asked. Ethan nodded, breathing hard. He looked at his arm, the burn showing on his skin, but didn't care. "I just didn't want to watch," he said simply. At that moment, a reporter from a local news channel captured the moment Ethan sat on the ground, his clothes soaked, his hands slightly burned, but still keeping a calm look. His photos and videos began to spread on social media, accompanied by the caption, "HMRC Sidona takes instantly, our lives saved, growing up, a place in the world can be lived in. Chicago's unsung hero." Ethan didn't care, he just cared that the woman was safe. Anyone would do that, if they knew someone in need. 3 days after the rescue, Ethan Walker sat in his small apartment. The old flat-screen TV was playing the evening news, and his image appeared on the screen. Video taken by a witness of Ethan pulling the woman from the burning car was played on every local TV station. Below it was a large headline: "Chicago's unsung hero, a convenience store employee saved people from burning car." Ethan sat on the sofa, holding an ice pack to the burn on his arm. Next to him, his mother, Clara, was carefully examining the red marks on her son's arm. "You took a risk, Ethan," she sighed, her eyes a mix of worry and pride. "But I'm proud of you." "I just do what needs to be done, Mom," Ethan chuckled. "If I don't do it, who will?" The landline phone suddenly rang, breaking the silence. Ethan picked up. "Hello, Ethan Walker." The voice of Mr. Randall, the convenience store owner, came on the other end of the line, dry and cold. "Yes, it's me," Ethan replied, his back straightening. "We need to talk. Can you stop by the store at 9 a.m. tomorrow?" "Yes, what is it?" "You'll know tomorrow," Mr. Randall said curtly, then hung up immediately. Ethan felt a bad premonition rising in his heart. Here. The next morning, Ethan arrived at the convenience store earlier than the appointed time. He walked in, and the atmosphere inside was different. A few of his co-workers looked at him curiously, and some even whispered to him. "You're about to be called to account," a colleague whispered. "Wow." Mr. Randall doesn't like attention-seeking employees. "It's an unwritten rule," the colleague shrugged and turned away. Ethan's heart was heavy. In Mr. Randall's office, dim light illuminated the walls, covered with papers and sales charts. Ethan sat across from his boss. Mr. Randall, a middle-aged man with silver hair and gold-rimmed glasses, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking at Ethan. "Do you know why I called you here?" Mr. Randall asked, his voice stern. "No, sir. I thought you wanted to talk about the rescue the other day," Ethan said, trying to keep his cool. "It's exactly what happened." Randall leaned forward, his face showing his displeasure. "You left your shift without permission. You left the store without following the rules. You know that's against the rules." Blowing away. "But I just went out to save a life," Ethan said, his voice starting to crack. "The car could explode at any moment. I couldn't just stand by and watch." "That's none of your business, Ethan," Mr. Randall interrupted, his voice firm. "You have a duty here. No one pays you to be a hero. My store needs people who can focus on their jobs." "Sir? Are you serious?" Ethan couldn't believe his ears. "Absolutely," Mr. Randall replied coldly. "And since you have violated the rules, I am forced to terminate your employment, effective immediately." Ethan's heart felt like someone was squeezing it. "You would fire me for saving a life?" "Rules are rules," Mr. Randall replied, his eyes unwavering. "But," Ethan stood up, gritting his teeth to keep from saying anything offensive. He left the office, feeling his world fall apart around him. That afternoon, Ethan sat on the sofa in his apartment, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Beside him, his mother sat silently, her aged hand gently placed on her son's shoulder. "It's okay, son. Everything will be fine," she said, her voice gentle but filled with worry. "I was just trying to do the right thing, Mom. I don't understand how the right thing could lead to this," Ethan replied, his voice full of bitterness. A knock on the door interrupted the mother and son's conversation. "Who is it?" Ethan asked, going to open the door. Outside was a gentleman in a gray suit, a kind face and neatly combed gray hair. He carried a leather briefcase, his face showing sincerity. End of title. A Self-Made Millionaire by Ray Comsworth. "Hello, are you Ethan Walker?" the man smiled. "Yes, and who are you?" Ethan frowned. "Jonathan Harper," the man held out his hand. "I am the father of Amelia Harper, the girl you saved from that car that day." Ethan blinked, surprised. "You're her father?" "Yes." Jonathan nodded. "I came here to thank you." Jonathan pulled out a thick envelope and handed it to Ethan. "Here's a little gift from our family. $10,000 so you can pay your bills and take care of your mother." Ethan took a step back, looking at the envelope as if it were foreign. "I can't take this money. I didn't do this for pay." "Well, what else do you have here?" "I know, and that's why I want you to have it," Jonathan said, his voice low and sure. "But that's not all." Jonathan smiled warmly. "I have an offer too. My company is always looking for people with a sense of responsibility and courage. I have a position for you, customer support specialist. Starting salary is $50,000 per year, with health insurance." Ethan stood there, stunned. The bitterness was gone, replaced by utter amazement. "If this is about exercise, are you serious?" "Absolutely," Jonathan replied, his smile never fading. You don't have to answer right away. Think about it and call me when you're ready." "Now, how's the weather?" he asked. "Phenomenal," Jonathan replied. Ethan looked at Jonathan for a long moment, then finally nodded. I don't know what to say." "Let's just say you're willing to take this chance," Jonathan said, patting Ethan on the shoulder, "because I believe good people deserve a fresh start." Ethan clutched the envelope in his hand, watching Jonathan leave. For the first time in days, his heart felt light. He turned back to look at his mother and smiled. "Oh, there are more good people in this world than I thought." 3 months later, Ethan Walker's life has changed in ways he never dreamed possible. Ethan, who had once worked at a convenience store making minimum wage, now worked in the Harper Corporation offices, wearing a sharp suit and his own desk. His office was on the 10th floor of a modern building with large windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. A shiny new computer sat on his desk next to a fragrant cup of coffee, a luxury he had previously been unable to afford. This morning, Ethan sat in front of his computer screen, going through customer support requests. The work wasn't too difficult, but it required patience and attention to detail, something Ethan had in abundance. The phone on his desk rang, and he gently picked it up. "Good morning, this is Ethan Walker from Harper Group Customer Support. How may I help you?" His voice was deep and confident, a far cry from his hesitant tone a few months ago. On the other end, the customer shared his problem, and Ethan took careful notes, listening with his usual patience. After helping and wishing the customer a good day, he gently put down the phone, took a deep breath, and looked out the window. The Chicago sky was clear today, no rain, only bright rays of sunlight shining through the glass. Shining on his desk. He sat quietly for a moment, looking at his own reflection in the glass. His face was less tired now, replaced by serenity. When Ethan arrived home, he found his mother tending to some small potted plants on the windowsill. His mother looked much better than she had 3 months ago. With financial support from Harper Group, Ethan was able to take Clara to see a specialist and buy a variety of better medications. Clara no longer had to worry about mounting medical bills. "Mom, do you need any help?" Ethan asked, hanging his suit jacket on the rack. "No, I was just tending to these geraniums." Clara turned and smiled. "You're back so early." "Early work today, Mom," Ethan smiled, sitting down next to her. "You look so different, Ethan," she said, looking at her son. "Your life seems better, doesn't it?" Ethan smiled, looking at her with warm eyes. "Yeah, much better. But you know what? The best part isn't the job or the paycheck." "So what's the best part?" Clara tilted her head, curious. Without being asked, her eyes lingered on Clara's. "It's the feeling that I did the right thing," Ethan replied, his eyes sparkling. "I think if I could go back in time, I would still rush in to save her. The new job, the money, the fame, none of it matters as much as knowing that I saved someone." Clara looked at her son, her eyes filled with tears. "I am proud of you, Ethan. You have always had a good heart." Ethan didn't answer, just squeezed her hand lightly. One Saturday morning, Ethan and his mother went to the supermarket near their house to buy daily necessities. As he walked out of the supermarket entrance, he suddenly saw a familiar face. Mr. Henry, the homeless man Ethan had helped 3 months ago. But this time, Mr. Henry was no longer wearing the ragged shirt he had worn before. He was wearing a thick coat, a small backpack on his shoulder, his face bright and full of life. "You're Ethan, right?" Mr. Henry asked, smiling hesitantly. Ethan was surprised but quickly recognized him. "Uncle Henry? Is that really you?" he asked, and placed his hand on Henry's shoulder. "Yes, it's me," Mr. Henry smiled, rubbing his calloused hands. "You don't recognize me. I've changed a lot. All that has changed is my outward appearance. You look a lot better than before." Ethan smiled brightly. "Are you okay? I was worried about you." "It's fine, thanks to you," Mr. Henry replied, his eyes shining with gratitude. "The money you gave me that day, I used it to buy a big meal and go to a homeless shelter. They helped me find a job. Now I work as a packer in a factory. It's not much money, but at least I don't have to sleep on the streets anymore." "I'm glad to hear that, Uncle Henry." Ethan squeezed Mr. Henry's hand. Mr. Henry's hand. "And I won't forget what you did for me," Mr. Henry said, pulling a small bouquet of flowers from his backpack. "I saved up to buy these. Consider them a thank you." Ethan smiled and took the flowers from his father. They were small geraniums, his mother's favorite flower. Ethan returned the geraniums to his pocket. "I'll plant them with my mom," Ethan said. "They'll remind me that small actions can change someone's life." At a company-wide meeting, Jonathan Harper stood before the entire staff. Dressed in a tailored suit, he spoke about the company's core values: compassion and responsibility. "In our company, we look for people not only with good skills, but also with good hearts. One of those people is sitting here today," Mr. Jonathan said, gesturing toward Ethan. Introducing Ethan Walker, an unsung hero who acts bravely without reward. He reminds us that kindness needs no reason. The entire auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Ethan sat there, his face flushed with embarrassment, but his heart filled with pride. Mr. Jonathan smiled, nodding toward Ethan. "You have shown us that, in the most difficult moments, kindness is always a guiding light." Later that day, Ethan returned home and carefully placed Mr. Henry's geraniums in a pot on the windowsill. Mrs. Clara stood beside him, her eyes soft as she watched her son. "Isn't it pretty, Mom?" Ethan asked, adjusting the small flowers. "That's beautiful, Ethan," Clara smiled. "But the most beautiful thing is the people you touch and change in their lives." Ethan smiled, standing looking at the pot of geraniums in the evening light. Life can be tough, but in the darkest days, kindness is always the small flame that guides the way. And for Ethan Walker, it's a flame that will never go out. And that is an inspiring story about kindness, courage, and unexpected rewards in life. Remember, sometimes a small action can make a big change, not only for others, but also for ourselves. If you believe in the power of kindness, please share this story with your loved ones. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow Kindness Stories so you don't miss the next warm stories. Thank you for joining us, and see you again on the journey of spreading kindness everywhere.